Hi, welcome to part 2 of the video. I'm going to show you how to cut and wrap your spine, and I'm going to show you how to wrap the corners of your covers with your little 1x5 squares. So for this video, you're going to need, excuse me, for this video, you're going to need 4 of your 1x5 inch squares. You're going to need your 2 bookboard covers. You're going to need your spine bookboard. You're going to need your 9-inch by 3-inch strip of book cloth and your 5-inch by 3-inch piece of book cloth. Okay. You're also going to need a piece of scrap paper, wax paper, or just anything that'll keep glue from getting on your cutting table. You're also going to need some glue and your brush. Left mine out of the water for a bit too long. See how it's getting crusty. And you're also going to need a ruler and a pencil, as well as your X-Acto knife. Okay, so first things first, we're going to work on our spine. So I'm going to grab my text block. So hopefully your text block has been sitting under something heavy or in a book press for at least 5 minutes. It's looking good, it's looking pretty flat. So we're going to grab our text block, and we're also going to grab our 2 front and back covers. You can ignore these for now. For the sake of the demo, I have like 1/2 ready and 1/2 to show you. So ignore this for right now. You're going to sandwich your 2 front and back covers, hard covers, over your text block. So this is what your sandwich should look like. Okay. Right, you're gonna make sure the spine edge is nice and even, and you're gonna lay that down in front of you like this with the spine facing the left side. Now you're gonna take your I believe yours should be 7 inches long by 3 inches wide. You're gonna grab your spine board, and we're gonna cut down this spine to a more appropriate size for our book. So mine is gonna be different than yours, and yours is gonna be different than everybody else's because of how we glued, how much pressure we put on there, how much time we put it in under weights, etc. There's a lot of variables, so my measurements are going to be different than your measurements, but we're still going to follow the same process. So what you're going to do is you're going to put your text block with your covers on it, and you're going to face the spine towards the left side, and you're going to put a little bit of pressure to even out your book. So you can see my foredge is sort of lifting. So I'm going to put a little bit of pressure and make it slightly more even. I'm putting very little pressure on my text block. Now I'm going to push my spine up against the spine edge of my text block. Okay. Now I'm going to maneuver my left hand so that my thumb and my pointer finger will hold the same amount of pressure. Actually, it might be better just to hold a pencil while you do this. So I'm going to grab a pencil with my right hand. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure just to even out my text block so that my right hand side or my foredge isn't pushing upwards. So I'm going to even out my text block very lightly. And then I'm going to draw a line where my text block meets my spine. You only have to do it once at the top. So if I show you, I've done so here. So you're going to mark an X where you measured your text block. Okay, so if I hold it up for you, my text block is about that high on my spine. So now I'm going to put my text block away. I won't need it for a while, but you're going to make sure you keep your front and back hardcovers. So I'm going to take those, and then I'm going to continue to put this under weights because I don't need it at the moment. Okay, I'm going to put my hardcovers to the side. Now you're going to take your ruler and you're going to measure the line that you just made. And if you don't know how to read a ruler, all you have to do is go up to the closest line. So let's say, here, let me use this area. It'll be a little bit easier. So if the end of your line or the end of your book board in the area that you measured does not line up to one of these lines, you're going to go up to the closest line. So if you don't know what this measurement is, you can just, with a pencil, draw a line. And then I'm going to go down to the opposite side of the mark I made previously, and I am going to mark that same amount of space. Okay, now I'm going to connect those lines. And draw a line all the way, down the length of my spine. So this here is my new spine. I'm going to cut along that line I just made. With an X-Acto. So my piece that I started with is a little bit smaller. So I'm struggling a little bit to keep the ruler on there. But yours is wider, so you shouldn't struggle as much as I am right now. Still not good. Remember, you're making several shallow cuts until you reach the bottom of your book board. That way you don't cut yourself or, you know, make a random crazy style cut. Okay, so now we're going to switch over to our book cloth. We're going to keep our spine just to the right of us here. And I'm going to focus on this 9 by 3 inch piece of book cloth. So I'm going to turn it so that the longest side is facing me. And I'm going to grab my ruler and my pencil. You're going to measure 1 inch in from the short side. I'll show you now. So I've lined up my book cloth to the 0 on my ruler. So I'm going to measure 1 inch going in. And on the opposite side, I'm going to measure another inch going in. And just like we do when we're tearing our paper, I'm going to make the same marks up here. Okay, now I'm going to connect them. So I'm using a rather dark pencil, so hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. 1 inch inward, another inch inward, okay? But I would recommend, if you have a light book cloth, see, you can somewhat see my pencil marks through my book cloth because this is a fairly light color. So if you have a light color book cloth, please use a lighter pencil or less pressure. Okay, now we're gonna turn our book cloth so that the short edge is facing us. And you're gonna draw a line down the center of your book cloth. So since this is 3 inches wide, my center is 1.5 inches. So I'm gonna mark that at the top and at the bottom. Okay. And then I'm gonna connect those lines. Alright, so now I'm just going to put this to the side and I'm going to grab my book board spine and I'm going to do a similar thing. So I'm going to measure my spine. Excuse me. So I'm going to measure the width of my spine and I'm going to draw a line down the center of the length of the spine. So if you don't know how to read a ruler, what you can do is you can count these lines. So right now my width of my book board is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 12. Actually 13/16. So half of 13 is 7.5. And so now I'm going to start at the end again and I'm going to count in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oops, too far. 7. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so as a reminder, all of our spines are going to be a different width because my text block has a lot more pages than yours than your text block. The width of my spine is going to be different, and so is everyone else's. So follow the steps that I'm taking, but don't follow the exact measurements. Find your own measurements. Now, once I've marked the center on the short side of my spine, I'm going to go ahead and draw a center line across. Okay, so now we are ready to glue our spine together. So I'm going to grab a piece of throwaway paper. I'm going to grab my 5 by 3 inch rectangle of book cloth, my glue, and my brush. And before I glue down, I will show you what we're going to do next. So the reason we marked these is because our spine is going to go in the very center of our book cloth. So those lines are going to guide us. We want the book board to be in between those 1 inch spaces we made earlier, and we want our center line to match up with the center line of the book cloth. Okay, so we're going to apply glue to our spine. And you don't want to glue on the registration line that you made, so you're going to flip it over and do it on the blank side. Okay. So Bookboard is a little bit more absorbent, so you'll see it like really bounce up. Don't be afraid, just try to work quickly so your glue doesn't dry. Also, at a certain point you'll have to hold the bookboard with your finger, and you're gonna get glue on your finger. So you can just dip it into your water and wipe it off on your rag. That way you don't have glue fingers when you're touching all your book cloth. Okay, so I put my brush back in my water. I'm gonna grab a different throwaway sheet. And now I'm going to very lightly align my spine to that center. Okay, and once it looks good, I'm gonna press it down with my finger. I'm gonna grab my bone folder. You're gonna grab your bone folder, and I'm going to burnish that down on the spine side or the bookboard side, and then I'm gonna flip it over. I'm gonna make sure my bone folder is clean, and I'm gonna burnish it on the other side as well. Okay, awesome. So now we're gonna turn in these 1-inch spaces that we made earlier, like so. So we're gonna apply glue to these spaces. So let's get another throwaway sheet. Wipe off excess water from my brush. And I'm gonna apply glue inside those lines. If you get a little bit of glue outside the lines at this point, that is okay. You also want to put a bit of glue on that edge of your bookboard, so you make sure you get nice adherence. Okay. Flip it over, glue the other side. So you're welcome to fold over one side and then start on the other side. That way you don't have to work so quickly. I guess I'm being reckless right now. So I'm doing the exact same thing on the other side. Okay. Now I'm just going to press, I'm gonna fold this and press it against my bookboard. And then I'm going to fold it over and make sure everything is lining up when I fold it. So making sure these edges are lining up. I'm pressing it down with my finger, and then I'm gonna grab my bone folder and I'm really going to rub that down. If you have some glue, just wipe it off as you go. If I had a real bone folder, I would be able to get into these little crevices where the bookboard meets the book cloth. So you kind of want it to look like your bookboard is vacuum sealed into your book cloth. So I'm just applying a little bit more glue because it's not sticking there. Okay, perfect. And I might need to apply some more glue here too, because it has actually been a while. It took me longer than I thought. So I'm just putting some more glue in case it dried against those edges of the bookboard. And then I'm folding it over. So if you got some glue on your book cloth, what you can do is you can grab your rag and clean it off. The book cloth we're using is starched, so it's kind of water repellent, so it won't soak into the book cloth as much as a non-starched version. So I'm gonna grab a new sheet of throwaway paper. It's not really new. You can reuse these. I'm just kind of interchanging them. And while I'm using a different one, the last one that was wet will dry. Okay. Alright, so this is what my spine looks like right now. The next step is we're gonna glue this smaller 5 by 3 inch piece of book cloth to the inside, and we're gonna cover up that section. Okay, so I'm gonna apply glue to the spine and the book cloth, not the other way around. Remember, you want to go out so that you don't get glue underneath your book cloth. So at this point, it is important to keep glue out of these areas. You want to keep those glue free, because if I can show you in the sample book, when you open your book, you're able to see inside of that spine. Hopefully you can see. You're able to see inside of there. So if it's covered in glue, you're going to be able to see that. If you get a little bit of glue on there, just go ahead and wipe it off with your rag or with your finger. Whatever you can get to first. Okay, so once I've applied a healthy amount of glue, I'm gonna place my little guy on there. So if you accidentally cut your 5 by 3 inch piece too short and it's a little bit under 5 inches, you're gonna be left with a gap here. What you wanna do is you wanna push it closer to one side and leave the gap on the other side. And the side with a gap, you will just make the bottom of your spine instead of the top. So the space with the gap you can put near the bottom, and the space without you can leave it at the top. People are less likely to see the one at the bottom. Okay, so I press that down with my fingers, and then you're gonna grab your bone folder and you're gonna vacuum seal your guy. So if you look, I'm kind of off center, so it's hanging off the edge. You can lift this off and recenter it if you do it quickly enough. Like, as you can see, it's already tearing. But if you don't, like let's say you don't catch it till later, you can just trim off the excess from the outside. So once again, if you have some of this piece hanging off, of the ends here, you can just trim it off instead of tearing your book board or starting all the way over. Okay. Okay, so now this is what my spine looks like. Hopefully you can see that. Here is my 5 by 3 inch piece, and this was my 9 by 3 inch piece that I folded over my spine. your spine should look almost like it's vacuum sealed in there. So now I'm going to place this on top of my text block, and I'm going to press it while I do my next step. If you care about your book, by the way, that you're using to press your stuff, you might want to put a protective sheet in between the book and your spine. Okay, for this next part, you're going to need a piece of throwaway paper, you're going to need your pencil, a ruler, an X-Acto, your glue and your brush, and 4 of your 1.5 inch squares. Okay, so first things first, on the left hand side of your book board, is where you want your squares to be. So you're gonna mark an X on the left hand side of your book board on both of them, so they're gonna be exactly the same. You're gonna mark here and here in the upper left hand corner and the lower left hand corner, and you can write front cover and then your back cover. So you can write front and back if you want to, but just make sure that your X's are on the left side of your covers. Okay, so now we're going to grab our ruler, and with the short side of your cover facing you, just like it is now, I'm going to measure 1 inch from the left side. So I'm going to line up my cover with my 0 on my ruler, and I'm going to measure 1 inch, and I'm going to do the same at the top. Okay, now I'm going to connect those marks to make a 1 inch space down the length of my chipboard. Now I'm going to turn it so the long side is facing me. I'm going to line up my book board to my 0, and I'm going to measure 1 inch coming in on the left side, and I'm going to measure 1 inch coming in on the right side. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing up here. 1 inch coming in from the left and 1 inch coming in from the right. Now I'm going to connect those lines. Okay, so now your book board should look like this. There should be a 1 inch space on the left side of the longest side, and a 1 inch space at the top and the bottom, or the head and the foot of your cover. And you're going to do the same thing. Ignore the squares for right now. You're going to do the same thing to your back cover. So the reason we made these measurements is so that we know where to put our 1.5 inch square of book cloth. So we're going to line this up into that corner, just like I did on this back cover. So I'm going to grab my throwaway paper and my squares. gonna apply some glue to those corners. Okay. And then I'm just gonna line up my square. So I'm gonna press that down, turn it, paste down my second square. Okay, so I've already done my back cover, so you can pause here and do your first and second cover. I'm also going to burnish this down. Okay. Okay, now we're ready to continue. I've glued my squares onto my covers 1 inch in on both sides. Now we're gonna do something called turn-ins. So that means we're gonna flip our cover over. So here I see the front of my book cloth. I'm gonna flip it so that I see the back of my book cloth. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna mark an X in the corner of the book cloth that's parallel to the corner of your cover. I'm gonna do the same thing on this side, and I'm gonna do the same thing, ignore those X's, on here. So it should look a little something like this. Okay, so when we do our turn-ins, we're basically going to turn in the edges of the book cloth underneath the board, like that. So they'll end up looking something like this. But before we do that, we actually need to cut off this corner of the book cloth. So this one that we've marked with an X, it is parallel to the corner of the cover board. And you don't want to cut off too much. So I'm going to cut fairly close to my corner, but not all the way to the corner. If you cut all the way to the corner, you're gonna end up with a space like this when you turn over your edges, and that's gonna leave the corners of your book, you know, susceptible to damage. So more is better. If you have some overhang, like this, we'll take care of that in a moment. But let's go ahead and cut those corners off. Okay, so this definitely takes some practice. So I would recommend leaving more than less. It just takes some practice getting the perfect turn in. Okay. So I did that to these, and I'm gonna do that to my other cover. Ignore the double X. I had to rip this off and start over. Okay, so on this one, I'm gonna leave a little bit more. So I left a little bit more than I usually would, and I'm gonna show you what happens when I leave a little bit too much. So when you leave a little bit too much, you're left with this overhanging piece of book cloth, and it looks just like that. So there's a little pointy bit. But once we glue it down, we can actually use our bone folder to do something called like batting it down, I believe. And we're basically gonna beat it down so that it's not so pointy. So more is okay. Less is not okay. Alrighty. So now I cut all the corners off of my book cloth before I did my turn-ins. I'm gonna grab a sheet of throwaway paper so I can glue. And I'm gonna apply glue to the edge of the book board so it makes good contact and the book cloth. Okay, now I'm gonna turn those in. So if you have some glue, just take a rag and clean it off really quickly. And then you're going to press these down with your bone folder quite a bit. So these are really tight and there's a lot of tension because you're wrapping them over these edges. So you want to make sure that you burnish it for quite a bit, making sure they are stuck on there. And then you can also burnish the edges if you want some nice crisp edges. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bat it down. And I am hitting the corner lightly and turning my wrist and elbow as I go. That way it can be round, kind of just the motion of rounding as you're hitting it. Yeah. And you'll see the difference between the batted corner and the not batted corner in a moment. So I'm just making sure the edges make good contact. This will help folding it over. And then I'm going to press it down with my finger. Okay. So this one was really close to having a little open space there. If you look closely, there is a small little gap, which is not ideal, but it is what it is. And you can see that my corner is exposed. So I cut the corner a bit too close to the corner of the book board, but I have to work with it. Okay. Pat that down as well. Okay, so now these corners are complete. I'm gonna put this under weights while I do my other one. Okay. So I know you might be inclined to use your fingers instead of your bone folder, but your bone folder really allows you, this is a marker by the way, but your bone folder has these round and smooth edges, so it's going to do a really good job of burnishing without damaging your book board or your book cloth, and it also has a little bit of weight to it. I do use my finger a little bit, but not in the hard to reach crevices. Also, using your finger spreads glue around more than your book cloth, than your bone folder. Okay, so as you can see, that had quite a bit of overhang, so my corner still had a little bit more I should have cut, but this is better than having too little because I can just bat that down. It's covered in glue, so I can bat that down and it practically disappears. Okay, so batting your corners is a requirement, so make sure that you do that. This protects your corners and it ensures your longevity of your book. Okay, so now I've wrapped my two covers, my front and back cover. So the squares, the face of the squares, not the turn-ins, the face of the squares are going to be facing outwards. So this is my front cover, and if I flip it, this is my back cover. So they should both be facing outwards, just like this. Facing outwards on the back, flip it, facing outwards on the front. Okay, so in this video, we've done our front and back covers, and we've done our corners. We have our spine ready. That's what that looks like.